Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to talk about skills acquisition plans. Skills is 20 hours of content per the task list. It's most of your content, and it is the things that you will be doing, the actions you will be taking, the interventions that you will be doing as a behavior tech. Mainly, you do skills, you build individuals' skills. We've talked about skills acquisition plans previously in the assessment portion and in the preparing for the session portion, but now I'm gonna show you exactly what that looks like and what might be on a skills acquisition plan, so you have a really good foundation and then we're gonna go into all the ways that we would teach these new skills. The purpose of a skills acquisition plan is it's a roadmap for teaching the skills. So when we go back to those skills assessments, those were completed. We wrote up a report about it, and we know exactly where the learner's skills are and socially significant goals that will further their skills and help their independence, help their, recreation, help their family life. And so now we write that into this skills plan. And that would be in your binder, in your materials for each client. And you would be reviewing this each time that you went to somebody's house or you worked with a new client. And these would have the specific programs that you would be running. So this allows consistency across the staff and settings, so ensures all team members follow the same procedure and use the same methods. And it also provides you with how are we going to take data on this, so you and others are all taking the same data and looking at the skills in the same way. It provides the documentation for clinical supervision. And another thing I want to say is not a lot of times, I think almost always, there's more than one tech on an individual learner. And so it's important that all these plans are really clear and in places where you can find them easily so that you and the other tech do things the same. Because otherwise you're going to have messed up data, or if you're doing things different, they might do better with you rather than the other person. So you want to make sure this is a very clear document. And if you have any questions about it, you need to ask for help. So the key elements of the skill plan, and some of these words will be same as the behavior intervention plan, and they are very similar. The skill plan is different in that we're teaching self-help, communication, adaptive skills. Those could be replacement behaviors in the behavior intervention plan, but if they are only there to replace a problem behavior. The skill plan isn't replacing problem behaviors, it's just building all those skills. So the target behavior, what skill are we working on? A really clear, observable description of what that skill should look without any emotions or all those things that we talked about wouldn't be good in an operational definition. A teaching procedure, so the specific steps and methods to be used to teach the skill. So how are we going to, teach someone the skill? And I'll go into this whole section is all about the sort of programs we use to teach these skills, the next section, so the next two sections. So if you're like, what does she mean by that? Don't worry, you're going to know. I'll get to it. All the materials you might need to teach them this new skill, the prompt strategies and fading. We have a whole section on prompting. We'll have a reinforcement plan, so positive rewards to motivate the learner. We have a generalization strategy to teach this across people and skill settings. Having multiple texts does help that generalization. We'll have a data collection method, so the specific data plan that will be tracked and how the data will be recorded. Mastery criteria, the objective performance standards that will define when the plan is learned or the skills learned. And then a maintenance plan, how will they continue to practice this skill once you're gone? And so primarily, I'm not going to go too deep into teaching procedure right now because that's the rest of this whole section. What I'm going to go into is what these goals should look like. How should these goals be written on a skills plan? Meaningful goals are functionally relevant, align with their needs, will increase independence, and is written in clear, observable language. And this slide, so this is, you really want to make sure that you're writing meaningful goals. They're meaningful not only in the context of being clear and observable that you can work with and others can work with, but also meaningful to the client. So the client has to want to work on these skills, their family want to work on these skills. That's how we get socially significant goals. All goals should be SMART goals. It's something that we utilize in education. A lot of times in ABA, goals are naturally SMART goals. Like you'll automatically be able to, when your supervisor are writing goals, they are always SMART. But just to be sure you understand and know what a SMART goal is, we'll talk about it. So the first thing is it's going to describe exactly what the learner will do. It needs to have the number or observable criteria, like the accuracy and the mastery. It has to be achievable, so something that's realistic for the learner's current level and relevant, connected to the learner's needs through long-term goals. And then we also want them time-bound, so we need to know when this will be completed. Do we have a year? Do we have 6 months? If the goal encompasses all those things, we would call it a SMART goal. And we use the acronym because you can, S, specific is S, M is measurable, and so on. So it's a nice little way for you to remember. Okay, so each goal should be both have accuracy and mastery, and that is a confusing concept for everybody. Okay, accuracy is how correct do they need to be to meet the goal. So did they get it right? How much should they get it right? For example, if you had a task list of 10 items that they need to do to wash their hands, from turning the sink water on, putting their hands under the sink, pumping the soap, rubbing their hands together. So you have these 10 items. For washing hands, we probably want them to do all 10 of the items. So we would be looking for 100% accuracy. With academic goals, occasionally we're not looking for 100% accuracy. It just depends on the individual, the situation, all those things. For a math goal, they're doing 2-digit addition. Maybe getting 80% of the problems on a page is sufficient for us to say they met the goal. So it would be 80%. It's typically a percentage accuracy, but sometimes it's written in other ways. But how correct do they have to be? Do they have to be 100% correct, 80% correct to when we're going to say we met the goal? And so with a lot of skill building, like social skills, you might not be working with 100% correct because there's so much other things that could happen. So you still want them to meet, even if, another kid came up and started talking. So you have to just write them in a way that we can measure them. Sometimes that's a percentage, but it could be other measures. Okay, so what is mastery? And people confuse mastery and accuracy, and all SMART goals should have both. Mastery is how many times do they need to do it correctly with that accuracy that you already wrote into the goal or your supervisor wrote into the goal to say, like, this is mastered. They're done. We can move on. We're going to move into maintenance or generalization. If you're going to go 80% accuracy across 3 consecutive sessions with 2 different instructors in 2 different settings. So when you write that out, essentially what you're going to be asking for is 12 times. So 80%, 3 sessions, but each of the 3 sessions need to be with different instructors in 2 different settings. Sometimes we just say 80% accuracy over 5 sessions. In 5 times they get 80%, we can move on. And again, there's no right or wrong. This is individualized to the person and what you're doing, the skill itself, the environment, the teachers. It's all individualized. I've seen SPED teachers who want 80% all the time over 5 trials. Is how they write all their goals. So they like that. That's comfortable to them. So they're always doing that, which is okay. But really, it should be flexible to the learner. And then there's some people who always just want the 100% accuracy. So you just want to make sure it's flexible to the learner. But accuracy is how correct do they need to be? And mastery is how many times do we have to see this to say they mastered it? And so when you leave out mastery, essentially what the goal will be is if they do it one time correct, you can say they met it. Most of the time, that's not if I just have one good day, but the next day I fall behind and I'm not having such a good day, then you can't really say I mastered that goal. So we have the mastery, so we can have that precision, and the mastery gives us multiple sessions to be sure like they definitely met this. This provides consistency in our plan, so it will make sure that we see proficiency multiple times. If you go to meeting and they met it one time because you didn't write mastery in, you're like, oh, guess what? They can wash their hands. And the parents are like, well, you say that, but I saw them do this and they weren't able to in this setting. The parents are probably right because just because you saw it once doesn't mean it's mastered. But maybe if we see it 5 times in 2 different settings, there's a pretty good likelihood that they'll do that independently. Like we probably have mastered it. We probably have met the goal. So you can make sure there's no deterioration because if you see it once and when you start working with it, it might deteriorate. They might not have the skill. And this also helps with our generalization. So it's making sure a lot of times we write the generalization within mastery, like hand washing, for example, because different sinks are going to look differently, different environments. So you start at home and once they master at home, like to fully master a hand washing goal, they have to master it both at home over 5 trials and in like a public restroom over 5 trials. Common pitfalls is like the assumption that one session means it's learned. It just doesn't. Nobody learns that way. Occasionally with typical kids, you might be able to teach one time with easy stuff, but with harder stuff, they're not going to be able to do that. Especially with kids with developmental delays, you really want to make sure you're understanding mastery. Failing to program for generalization. If you're not using mastery, you're probably not programming for generalization. Using vague mastery criteria, you want to make sure it's clear data points. I see a lot, especially in schools, of 4 out of 5 trials. The benefit is you can still say they met the goal if they have a bad day. The downside is it's hard to figure out if they start doing it right and then mess up 2 times in a row. What do? Do you start over with your 5 trials? Can you use one mess up if they do 4 trials correct? So I don't ever use that. I do see people use it and I understand the reasoning. Ignoring maintenance or forgetting to test over time is also a pitfall. A good SMART goal should end with a mastery statement. With 80% independence across 3 sessions with at least 2 instructors. This sets really clear expectations and it will help your database decision making. Here is a hand washing goal that you might have on your skills plan. Say they'll have 10 different skills goals and this is the goal. You'd also have written underneath it kind of all those other things like the program that you're going to use to teach it, how you might reinforce somebody. But at the same time, you'll be tracking this data to say like, hey, they met this goal or they didn't meet this goal. So you know when to pull that off the program, maybe pull in something new or move it to maintenance. Hand washing. Given a task strip, Taylor will wash hands independently with 4 or fewer prompts across 3 consecutive days. I would rather say 3 consecutive times or trials. Teaching method, we're going to use chaining with most to least prompting, reinforcement, praise and tokens for each independent step, and mastery is 100% accuracy for all steps across 2 different sessions with 2 different staff. So that would be a possible program on your written skills plan or your skills acquisition plan, and you would be running this. We'll talk about how you do chaining with most to least prompting. And so you would be utilizing that teaching method and taking data on Taylor's hand washing behavior. When we do this, we want to make sure we're thinking about generalization from the start. Like this hand washing in their home bathroom is probably going to be the easiest thing they do. Like the second you go to different environments. Everything looks different, and you got to train lots of examples for hand washing. In fancy restaurants, sometimes there's like a stream of water that you wash your hands in. There's things people get very creative with hand washing in public places, like soap dispensers all over the place. I've used so many different types of soap dispensers, drying hands in public places, like the dryer, the towels, all sorts of things. You want to rotate materials so they know that they can use all materials, especially water temperatures. That's something we forget with hand washing, but water temperatures change things a lot. You want to revisit the skill periodically to make sure you have long-term maintenance, and you want to add components to the plan. So you want maintenance and generalization in there. All team members should thoroughly read and understand the written acquisition plan. Your team members should practice implementing it and methods and prompting strategies, and you should all train together. And then you want to ensure the staff utilizes the same hierarchy, prompting, and reinforcement system. You want to make sure everyone's taking data. If you're marking plus or minus on this task analysis of hand washing, like they did it without prompting or they did it with prompting, yet your coworker who's also working on it is putting the percentage she thinks they did it correctly, like they were about 20% accurately. We don't typically take data that way, but maybe she came out with a method and she's doing it. Now we can't tell. We can't compare those data. I'm not saying so when you go plus minus on all the steps, you would generate a percentage at the end. But if she did for step 1, I think they were about 50% correct on step 1. And step 2, they look 70% correct. And she had some sort of method in her head of doing that. We can't compare your data to her data, and we won't know how the student's doing. So that's why we need consistent data collection. And then you want a fidelity checklist. Fidelity is consistently implementing the intervention as intended. And it's really important that we have really good fidelity and we're always implementing things as intended.